Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to wait just a minute more before we get started to allow people to log on, okay? We will get started in about 1 minute. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SBA's certification webinar. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Sandra Anguiano, and I'm a business opportunity specialist here at the Orange County Inland Empire District Office. We cover Orange County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County here in Southern California. The programs we're going to be discussing today are available nationwide. So if you're joining us from a different county or a different state, it's the same rules across the board for all of our programs. You will be receiving a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording. So you don't have to worry about, jotting things down or saving any links. You will receive a live link for those when you receive a copy of the presentation. So today we're going to be covering the 4 SBA certification programs, which are the 8A Business Development Program, the HUBZone Program, the Woman-Owned Small Business Contracting Program, and the Veterans Certification Program. For those of you who have joined online via Teams, please make sure to use the Q&A box to type out any questions you may have. At this time, we can't take any live questions. We don't have the function to go ahead and unmute the lines. So I'll be monitoring that Q&A box throughout the presentation, and I'll try to answer those live as we go through it. If not, at the end of the presentation, I can go in and type answers to those. So please use that Q&A box. If you have any specific questions afterwards for a certain situation that you're in or anything like that, I will be sharing my contact information at the end of the presentation, so you can reach out to me directly as well. And if you'd rather talk to me offline. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. I hope you can all see my screen here. If there's any issues with that, please type them into the Q&A box. But I think we're ready to go. All right, so before I go ahead and jump into the programs, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to federal government contracting. So this may be useful information for those of you that are just starting off, that you're just starting to learn about federal contracting, or this may be a refresher course or provide some clarification for those of you who have already started the process. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first question that typically comes to mind is, what does the federal government buy? So the federal government buys just about everything, from office supplies to janitorial services to construction of government facilities and just much, much more. They are the largest procurer of goods and services with set annual goals for their huge budget. So as a small business, you should do your market research to determine if the federal government buys the service or product that you're trying to sell. We recommend that you do your market research to find out what the government is buying. So in the next few slides, we are going to cover a few useful links for you to use as a starting point to help you get started with this market research. I would also like to point out that there are various levels of government and not all certifications are equal. So the state is going to have its own way or its own process of procuring. Cities are going to have their own programs. Even large businesses and prime contractors have their own process. So it's very important for you to identify who you want to do business with to determine exactly which certification it is that you're going to need. So where can you go to conduct this market research? On this slide here, we have a few links to help you get started. For all government certifications, you will be required to have a SAM account. So this is something you want to get started on as soon as possible. So the System for Award Management. On this site, you can search by keyword, by industry, by geographic location if you're looking for a specific state or county, if you're looking for a specific agency even, to find opportunities. You're going to find all federal contract solicitations or invitations to bid with the value of $25,000 or more. They're going to be published here on this site. So you can set up your profile for free. If you need any assistance setting up that profile, you can reach out to one of our resource partners to help guide you through that process, because there are a few steps and some accounts that you have to set up before you can actually go and create the profile itself. We also have here the Dynamic Small Business Search System, or DSBS. So this site allows you to look at which contractors are currently selling to the federal government. So it helps you identify your competitors, right? This system is managed by the SBA, and on DSBS is actually where we're going to be listing your SBA certifications. So on here, you'll be able to see when you were certified into one of SBA's programs and what your exit date would be from that certification. We have the Interagency Directory, or ICD. This is a central repository of indefinite delivery vehicles awarded by the federal agencies, where the IDV is available for use at both the intra-agency and interagency levels. So this is going to include those government-wide acquisition contracts, multi-agency contracts, basic ordering agreements, and blanket purchase agreements. So check that site out as well. USA Spending. So this site provides information on how the federal government spends money or how they intend to. The U.S. government. So on this site, you can follow the money from the congressional appropriations to the federal agencies, and even down to like local communities and businesses. Then we have the GSA e-library. This is your one source for the latest GSA contract award information. And then the Acquisition Central. This site lets you search for forecasts by agency. So if you visit every agency's, web page, each agency has its own website, right? So this Acquisition Central consolidates all of that information. So instead of jumping from page to page, you can find everything here in one site. So the law requires that agencies compile and make available their projections of contracting opportunities that small, minority, and women-owned small businesses may be able to perform. So each of these sites that we've shared here on this slide, it's a great starting point for you to conduct your market research to get started on that. When you visit each of the links, you'll see that some of them offer, different trainings or webinars, and they'll list their points of contact for any questions that you may have. So I invite you to check that out once you receive a copy of the presentation. Now, the federal government has prime contracting procurement goals that must annually be met. So there are certain set-asides for certification programs and socioeconomic categories. Of the huge budget that the federal government receives each year, 23% of their total contracting dollars must be spent on small business. And specifically, or to narrow that down even more, there are targeted set-asides and acquisition goals for the programs that you see listed here. So 5% must go to women-owned small businesses, 5% must go to small disadvantaged businesses, which includes, 8A certified firms, 3% must go to HUBZone businesses, and 5% must go to service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. And we do have a note here that set-asides are reserved for small businesses between $3,500 to $250,000. Now, for all of our programs today, you're going to hear us reference that, you have to be a small business in order to participate in the programs. So the SBA determines the size standards for a small business, and there are two ways that size is looked at. So your size is going to be determined either by your average revenues over the past 5 years, or by the number of employees if you're a manufacturer, dealer, or wholesaler. So this depends upon your primary industry code. You will need to determine your primary industry code in order to determine if you fall under the threshold for revenue or number of employees. There is a link here for the size standard table. There are hundreds of NAICS codes, so the first step would be to identify your code and then look it up to determine if you are considered small based on SBA's size standards. So what types of businesses are getting contracts? This slide here provides an overview as to how or where the government spent its money. It is broken down by industry codes. There are various sectors, so depending upon which product or service you provide. Industry codes are very important in the federal government. You want to make sure that you get familiar with them. You know, you're going to hear NAICS codes over and over again, the North American Industry Classification System. So essentially what that means is that you're going to pick the code that best suits your business, and you're going to use that, you're going to use that code when you're asked, what does your firm do? What does your company do? No one assigns you a NAICS code. You alone must identify your industry code. These NAICS codes are used to track what the federal government is buying. And you have to have this number listed on sam.gov to demonstrate that you can provide a specific product or service. So as long as you have a business, you must have a business activity. And this code is merely describing what your primary and secondary income producing lines of business are, right? Most businesses have more than one revenue producing line of business. So you're going to have to identify one industry as your primary source of income, where the majority of your revenue comes from. And then, of course, you can have more than one industry listed on your profile. As long as you can provide that service and have the appropriate licenses, you can list those codes as secondary NAICS codes on your profile at sam.gov. As you start working with the federal government, you may want to look for opportunities as a subcontractor. These primes or large businesses get contracts and subs work under them. So if you aren't at the level to perform on your own as a prime, you would want to subcontract. This is a great opportunity for small businesses to gain capacity and experience, and you can list this as past performance for working as a subcontractor. Large procurements have subcontracting requirements, so prime contractors are looking for small businesses just like you. So you want to make sure that you visit their websites or contact their supplier diversity department to learn how to do business with them and become a sub. We do have a link on this slide. This is for Subnet. So Subnet is a database of subcontracting opportunities posted by large contractors looking for small businesses to serve as subcontractors. So I invite you to check that link out. So as you start digging into contracting, you're going to discover that there are many tiers. So here are a few tips that we offer for starting to work with federal agencies. We recommend that you focus on a few agencies at a time. Do your research, concentrate on those. There are numerous agencies and they all buy various things. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing their forecast to see what's coming and that you're visiting their websites to view the most up-to-date information. You can also reach out to the agencies directly. Each website will have a listed Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the OSDBU office, and you can contact them to learn how to do business with them. You must register on sam.gov. We cannot stress this enough. Every contractor must be registered if you want to do business with the federal government. This is where the federal government will confirm that you are a legitimate business. And this is also where you will be paid for providing your product or service. So step number one for any of SBA's certification programs would be to have this SAM profile set up. Your SAM profile will be verified and it must show as active. You go through all the steps and it's been processed before you may begin the application process for the SBA certification programs. Setting up a SAM profile is completely free, so make sure that you are at the right site, sam.gov. If you are asked to pay, then you are probably in the wrong spot. So make sure when you visit sam.gov that it says on there, official U.S. government website, that it shows it's 100% free. This process can take 4 to 6 weeks to finally get your profile up and running once everything is verified, all your codes match and everything like that. So make sure that you start setting this up as soon as possible. You can set that up, just to self-certify that you're a small business if you're not ready to apply for SBA's certifications. But just know that it does take some time to get that verified. And again, like I said, if you have any trouble or you want somebody to take a look at it to make sure you get it all right, please reach out to your local Small Business Development Center or a SCORE mentor so that they can help you with that process to make sure everything checks out. If you'd like more general information on government contracting, I invite you to visit the SBA's Government Contracting Classroom. Here you're going to find 5 to 6 minute videos on various topics related to government contracting. There are even videos on here on how to set up your SAM profile, so that may be something you want to check out. There's videos on how to contact the OSDBU offices and many other topics as well. So I recommend that you check that out if you have no knowledge yet. This Government Contracting Classroom is free, and you can play the videos as many times as you'd like. The SBA also has a YouTube channel with helpful videos that you may also want to look up to see if there are any topics of interest for you on there as well. If you are interested in doing business with other government levels, you want to make sure that you visit their websites. All of the SBA's certification programs are at the federal level. If you are looking to get certified as an SBE or DVBE, you would need to go through state procurement. If you are within our Tri-County area, you can reach out to each county that we have listed here on this slide to learn how to do business with them. Different organizations administer different programs, and their process is going to be, completely different from the SBA applications. If you need assistance with applying for other government level certifications, you can reach out to your local Apex Accelerator. This resource partner is funded by DoD, and they assist small businesses with procurement. So I invite you to check them out as well, another one of our resource partners. And yeah, it's really important to find out, who you want to do business with first, to learn what you need to do in order to participate in their programs. So this concludes the introduction to federal government contracting. I hope you have found this information useful and that you visit the links when you receive a copy of this presentation. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get started with the information on the SBA certification programs. But before I jump into the 8A, let me just make a second announcement here. For those of you that join late, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box. We can't unmute the lines to ask live questions, but I will be monitoring the Q&A box in there as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the 8A Business Development Program. So the 8A Business Development Program was named after a section of the Small Business Act, and it was designated to help small disadvantaged businesses to compete in the American economy and access the federal procurement market. So it was created to help firms that are owned and controlled by at least 51% socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So we're going to talk about what it means to be socially and economically disadvantaged when we get to the eligibility criteria. And we will also go over what it means to be owned and controlled and how the SBA reviews that information. The program provides entrepreneurs with targeted management and technical assistance to help them compete for contracts and other business opportunities. This program offers a 9-year term and a one-time only participation. So what are the benefits of the program? Why should you get certified into the 8A Business Development Program? So as I previously mentioned, the federal government's goal is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to small disadvantaged businesses each year. And as a participant in the program, we will provide you with management and technical assistance, marketing and outreach assistance with the mentor protege and joint venture programs. You can even form joint ventures with established businesses through the SBA's mentor protege program. And then you will also have access to surplus property. So these are tools and equipment that are available from the state, usually for pennies on the dollar. You would usually just have to pay for like the shipping of the item to you. Now, of course, the biggest draw to the program are the contract set-asides and sole source award opportunities. So these set-asides can be for up to $4.5 million for goods and services and up to $7.5 million for manufacturing. Now, as a small business, you can also participate in the SBA's Empower to Grow program. This was formerly known as the 7J Management and Technical Assistance Program. But you can take advantage of various courses and trainings that are available to you at no cost. So they provide businesses with free, free business courses, tailored training, one-on-one consulting to support, your operations, your hiring, and, they help you analyze your government contracting competitiveness. So visit the link to check out those resources that are available to you. Okay, so in the next few slides, we will be talking about the eligibility requirements for this program. So each category listed here will be something that you will be asked to provide information for in order to determine your eligibility. We will talk about ownership, control, U.S. citizens, small business side standards, potential for success, good character, social disadvantage, and economic disadvantage. On the right here in the red text is the reference for the Code of Federal Regulations in case you are interested in looking up all the legal terms. And please note that you must be in business for at least 2 years before applying for this program. And I'll explain why that rule exists later on in the following slides. Okay, first let's talk about ownership. So we require that the individual upon whom eligibility is based directly and unconditionally own at least 51% of the firm. So this must be direct ownership by the disadvantaged individual. You cannot be owned by another company. You cannot be owned by another trust. You must be the individual owner at 51% or more. Now, there can be more than one person to make up that 51%. If you have more than one owner, though, each individual will need to meet every eligibility criteria. If you are married and residing in a community property state, it may be necessary to submit a notarized transmutation agreement to ensure that the disadvantaged individual owns at least 51%. This is because community property rights impact this unconditional ownership. Now, there is no requirement on the structure of the business. You can be a partnership, an LLC, a corporation, a sole proprietorship, whatever structure you have set up, that's fine. But here are some examples of what the SBA will require in order for you to demonstrate that 51% ownership. We're going to ask to see things like the stock certificates and ledgers, your tax returns, the IRS 1040 Schedule C, Schedule E, if that's applicable to your business. So when your application gets submitted, it gets assigned to an analyst or a reviewer. And what that reviewer will be looking for is proof that on paper, you can demonstrate that you own at least 51% of the business. Control. We do require that the individual hold the highest position, be the highest compensated, employee of the firm. You have to make the long-term decisions, run the firm's day-to-day business operations, possess the appropriate amount and type of management experience needed to run the firm. You have to work full-time at the firm and be physically located in the United States. Now, if you do have an employee or, another officer in the firm that is the highest compensated, you would have to provide us with information as to why it is in the best interest of the firm that others receive a higher compensation. So just keep that in mind, that you may be asked for that information if we do notice on your tax returns or W-2 forms that you are not the highest compensated in the firm. For all of SBA's programs, you must be a U.S. Citizen in order to participate. You will be asked to provide a copy of your U.S. passport or your certificate of naturalization. So please keep that in mind as well. As I mentioned earlier, to be eligible for the program, you must be a small business. So you're going to have to identify your primary NAICS code, to determine if it falls under the revenue or number of employee threshold. And again, the link here to the size standard table is listed on here. Also, the SBA looks at the firm's and the principal's relationships with other businesses and other individuals through prior relationships, family ties, common investments, etc. So if you have ownership in other businesses, you must disclose that information. Keep in mind that this is used to determine the size of your business. Okay, potential for success. So your firm must have the necessary track record and financial capacity to perform successfully on contracts that could be awarded in the 8A program. So the firm must meet potential for success criteria. And typically this is demonstrated by the firm being operational for at minimum 2 full years, as verified by revenues reported in the firm's primary NAICS code. And this is why I mentioned that we are going to ask to see the firm's business tax returns. So we want to make sure that participants in our program are ready and that they will be successful in the program. We don't want this to cost you money or to be a burden for you, right? If you get into the program, we want you to make money and win contracts. So the federal government has certain requirements for businesses that are looking to bid on projects, which is very different from the private sector. So in anticipation of that, we do like a little precursor and review your business for its potential for success. So we're going to take a look at your financial capability, make sure you have sufficient capitalization, financial performance, bonding capacity, and manageable debts, managerial and technical capability, performance on previous contracts, that the firm has the necessary personnel, licenses, certifications, facilities, and prior experience, management capability, the education, experience, and training of CEO and other managers, the magnitude and complexity of past or current jobs, and your management systems. Your qualifications for ability to perform on federal contracts, so any relevant contracting experience, your ability to meet federal procurement policies. This is just to be sure that if you get into the program, you can take advantage of those contracting benefits and that you'll be able to successfully bid and win on these contracts that are set aside for the 8A program. So in line with that, like I said, you must be in business in your primary NAICS code for at least 2 full years immediately prior to the date of your 8A application. So what does that mean? So for at least 2 years before you even apply for the program, you must have been doing business in, that primary NAICS code before you can apply. So this is another important reason why you need to identify, those NAICS codes. So we understand that sometimes businesses transition from doing one thing to another. Sometimes it's in a related field, sometimes it's not. So what we are looking for is for proof that you have been doing work in the same NAICS code for at least 2 years. So you are going to have to provide proof that you have generated revenue. Now, if the business has not generated revenues, if you don't have the tax returns to prove that, you may request the 2-year waiver. So let's say maybe you haven't been in business for 2 years, but you have the experience, or maybe you've been in business for 2 years, but you switched to a different industry. So you can't demonstrate that for 2 full years, you've been doing business in that specific NAICS code. So if that's the case, you can request a waiver, but just keep in mind that there are a few conditions that must be met in order for this waiver to be granted. So you must have substantial business management experience. You must demonstrate technical expertise. You must have adequate capital, and you must have a record of successful performance on contracts. So you're going to have to address each element of the 2-year waiver in detail. You're going to have to provide copies of contracts, letters of reference to verify, your successful contract performance, copies of invoices, proof of payment, things like that. If the firm has not generated any revenues whatsoever, in those 2 years, and you can't provide proof of that, it hasn't been in the same NAICS code, or you switched, or whatever reason, then, they're going to be unable to waive the 2-year rule. So as a small business owner, you should strategically consider the timing on applying. If your business experience is limited and exposure to the federal marketplace is at its infancy, then maybe you should wait a little bit. Just because, businesses who have an established track record as a subcontractor or prime contractor at the federal level, they tend to experience greater growth and higher levels of success and sustainability than those businesses that are just starting off in federal contracting. So, really think about when you should apply for this program. The 8A program is a one-time only 9-year term program. So you can't, come into the program and say, oh, you know what, I wasn't ready, let's put a pause on it, or, oh, I'm not ready, like, let me just get out of the program and I'll reapply in a few years once, I've built up my business. No, it's a 9-year term program from start to end. You cannot pause it, you cannot reapply or anything like that. So really think about when to apply to the program so that you can make the most of the limited time and increase your chances of winning contracts. Ask yourself these questions and be honest with yourself. If you're a single person company who has never done a contract larger than $250,000, you may want to focus on building your business a bit more before you apply for the program. Some firms may be eligible for the 8A program. They check off all the boxes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready to contract with the federal government. So ask yourself these questions to determine if you are on a path to success. Is your business procurement ready? Make sure you are ready to do business with the government before you go and obtain any of the federal certifications. Can you identify the federal agencies that purchase what you sell? Are you prepared to access a line of credit or performance bond if that's required for your industry? Have you selected a NAICS code? Are you already registered in SAM? Have you completed a capability statement? Can you provide examples of similar work that your firm has completed that generated revenues? Your potential for success will depend on what stage your business is in. Are you just starting up, or are you well seasoned? So really think about, when you should apply for this program. Are you really ready, or should you, wait a few more years? Okay, now let's talk about good character, another criteria for eligibility, right? So the SBA wants to make sure that participants in our program have good character. So the SBA is going to take a look at the following to make this decision. We'll take a look at any adverse information regarding criminal conduct, violations of any SBA regulations, debarred or suspended firms or individuals, any principal who is incarcerated or on parole, submission of false information during the application process or after approval, any firm or any of its principals that fail to pay financial obligations to the federal government. Now, for that last point there, some examples of that are if you have any tax liens, if you've been delinquent on a student loan, if you've defaulted on an SBA loan, or any other federal obligation, is going to lead them to finding that you do not have good character. Now, let's say that maybe you do have a tax lien, but you're on a payment plan now. If you can submit proof of that, documentation of that, that that you're paying it, then that's fine. As long as you can show that you have it and you're current on it, then that's okay. They won't say, okay, no, you don't have good character. They'll see that you're working towards making progress on that. Okay, now we're going to talk about social disadvantage. Okay, so let me just give you some background information on this because this has changed recently. So back in July of 2023, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Tennessee issued a ruling in the Ultima Services Corporation versus the Department of Agriculture affecting the 8A Business Development Program. So prior to this ruling, individual Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, and subcontinent Asian Americans applying for the program could establish that they were socially disadvantaged by demonstrating that they held themselves out as a member of one of those designated groups. So this practice has been known as using a rebuttable presumption of social disadvantage, or as a presumption of social disadvantage, right? So while most 8A firms establish their 8A program eligibility through a presumption of social disadvantage, other 8A firms were admitted to the 8A program because the qualifying individual owner had established their social disadvantage by a preponderance of the evidence. So, for example, submitted a narrative as part of the original application. Well, in this ruling, the court barred SBA from using the presumption of social disadvantage to administer the 8A program. So, under guidance, regarding the court's order, the SBA now requires all 8A applicants to establish their 8A program eligibility by completing a social disadvantage narrative. So the definition of social disadvantage means that an individual has been subjected to racial, ethnic, or cultural bias within American society because of their identities as members of groups and without regard to their individual qualities. Now, the discrimination or bias experienced by an individual must be chronic, substantial, and have occurred within American society. Now, an individual only needs to establish social disadvantage once for the entirety of the program. So, we're not going to constantly be asking you to submit a narrative. It'll just be one time at the time of application. The SBA must determine that the discrimination or bias experienced by an individual, like I said, is chronic, substantial, and has occurred within American society. It couldn't have happened or taken place within another country. Now, the discrimination must have negatively impacted your entry or advancement in the business world. So, to demonstrate social disadvantage, business owners should include the following elements when they're writing out their narratives. So you'll need to include an indication of which identity or identities is or are the basis of social disadvantage. So, examples of this are your race, religion, ethnic origin, gender, sexual orientation, identifiable disability, isolation from American society, and others. You will need to provide descriptions of incidents in which the bias or discrimination has occurred. These experiences should be related to education, employment, and business history. If you visit the link here on the guide for writing a social disadvantage narrative, you will find examples of what to include in your narrative. It doesn't have to be super lengthy. There's not like a maximum amount of, identities that you can elaborate on in your narrative. But they do say, at least have two, and make sure that those are connected, to your race, gender, whatever. You have to have something to really identify it to prove that you are socially disadvantaged. And taking a look at that, the guide for writing a social disadvantage narrative will provide you with clear examples as to what they're looking for to make sure, that you meet the criteria for that. Now, a socially disadvantaged individual must also be economically disadvantaged in order to participate in this program. So it's both. You have to be socially and economically. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. And then if you have more than one applicant or more than one owner, all applicants must meet the criteria as well. So in order to be economically disadvantaged, the SBA reviews the individual's personal net worth, which must be less than $850,000 after we exclude all legitimate retirement accounts and any equity in the primary residence and the applicant firm. We also review the individual's total asset level, which may not exceed $6.5 million, with the only allowed exclusion being any legitimate retirement accounts. And finally, the individual's average 3-year income may not exceed $400,000. Since we are here in California, and California is a community property state, we will look at your spouse's assets as well. We will split everything 50-50. So whatever you claim to own on your own, 50% goes to your spouse and 50% will go on your personal financial statement for purposes of determining your adjusted net worth. Your salary or income will be verified through your personal tax returns. If you are interested in calculating this for yourself before applying, you can look up SBA Form 413. You can do a quick Google search for this or visit the SBA's website. We have it there as well. This form is going to help you list out your assets. So if maybe there is something you didn't think about that we would ask for, that form is going to help you, calculate line by line what your adjusted net worth would be. So those are the eligibility requirements for the 8A program. During the application process, you're going to be asked questions in all of these sections. So, just make sure that you are honest and forthcoming when you complete the application. There are specific questions that are asked on the application, and they're a big part of the eligibility criteria for the program. So if you don't disclose information and the SBA discovers it, it's going to create more issues for your application, right? We're often asked, what would have an impact on my application? So if the analyst reviewing your application sees that there's, a pattern of you constantly getting in trouble, if you're in and out of jail, if you have any felonies or violence, if they discover, you have bad business integrity for like writing bad checks or things like that, that would have like a negative impact on your application. Smaller things that maybe wouldn't impact your application would be things like, if they find that you have a citation for underage drinking or a citation for recreational drug use, if you were caught, jaywalking or something like that. Smaller things like that really wouldn't affect your application. But just be as honest as possible when you are answering those questions on the application. And then once you're ready to apply, please visit My SBA Certifications. That's at certifications.sba.gov. This blue button down here will be a live link for that, so you can click on that there. At the end of the presentation, once I go over the other certification programs, I will provide some more information on that My SBA Certifications portal. So stay tuned for more info on that. Okay, so there are a number of resources available to you on the SBA's website, as well as a dedicated email box for any general information. Here locally at the district office, we can answer general questions about the 8A program, but we have no say when it comes to your application. Those actually go to like our program office back in headquarters. So here locally, we don't review those applications. I do recommend that you reach out to one of our resource partners, such as, the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, the Women's Business Center, Veterans Business Outreach Centers. They can help you, review your application before you submit. You can also visit the My SBA Certifications resources link for all tools, frequently asked questions, and program information for the 8A Business Development Program. Our program office does put on occasional trainings as well, or they help guide you through the application process. So if you're interested in signing up for any of those trainings, please send them an email to 8atrainings@sba.gov. And if you have any like program questions, policy questions, anything like that, you can send those up to 8aquestions@sba.gov. Then, we have the links here for, how-to videos, the business applicant user guide. That includes like a lot of screenshots as well. So that'll help guide you. The FAQs. And then if you have any questions about like the My SBA certification portal, you can send those to certifications@sba.gov. Now, in the last few weeks, we have been receiving questions about how the DEI executive order impacts the 8A program. And the answer to that is that the 8A program is a race-neutral program. So any small business can apply to the program. This program is statutorily authorized, and SBA will implement the law. The SBA will continue to work with procuring agencies to award 8A contracts where appropriate. So this concludes the information on the 8A program. Let me check my Q&A box if there are any questions I may have missed. Someone is asking, if the presentation will be available for download. Yes, we will be sending that out to you within the next 24 to 48 hours, a copy of the presentation with a link to the recording as well. That's the only question I saw pending on there. So let me get ready to go into the HUBZone program now. All right. So what is a HUBZone? A HUBZone is a historically underutilized business zone. So the program was designed to help small firms in certain communities gain access to federal contract opportunities. HUBZone areas are typically areas of low median household incomes or high unemployment, or it could be both. We will talk about how you identify these zones in the following slides. The HUBZone program certifies the eligibility of businesses in disadvantaged communities to compete for federal set-aside contracts, offering employment and growth opportunities where they're most needed for positive economic impact. Now, the federal government has a mandate of awarding 3% of all prime contract dollars to HUBZone certified firms. For reference here, we have that, in FY23, the federal government spent $17.5 billion on HUBZone contracts. So there are contract set-asides and sole source opportunities for firms that are certified into the HUBZone program. And at any given time, there are about 5,000 small firms that are certified in the HUBZone program nationwide. So as a participant in the HUBZone program, you also receive a 10% price evaluation preference applied to full and open competition. So what does that mean? So if you are certified as a HUBZone business and you bid on a project that is open to competition, right? It's not a HUBZone set-aside, it's totally open to competition. Then you get a 10% price evaluation preference applied to the contract when being compared to a large business. So if solely based on price and you and a large business have the same pricing, they will apply that 10% price evaluation preference, meaning that they're going to add 10% to that large business so that your bid would be considered lower. This is the only federal program that applies this benefit outside of set-asides. Generally your benefit is for your certification only, so only, it should only apply to HUBZone set-asides. But this program lets you use it on full and open competition as well. So where are these HUBZones? So across the country, there are more than 22,000 communities that are designated as HUBZones. You have qualified census tracts. These are designated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they're based on poverty and household income criteria. Qualified non-metropolitan counties. So these are, counties located in non-metropolitan areas that meet at least one of the socioeconomic criteria. Redesignated areas. So these are qualified census tracts and qualified non-metropolitan counties that have lost their HUBZone status due to changes in income levels, unemployment, or poverty levels. You have qualified Indian land. So lands contained within the boundaries of an Indian reservation, Indian country, or any other specific definition that applies in the state of Oklahoma, I believe. You have qualified disaster areas. So this includes the census tracts and counties declared major or catastrophic disaster areas by the President of the United States. Governor designated areas. So certain rural areas that state governors have petitioned the SBA to designate as HUBZones. So the basis for all of these areas are high unemployment and or low income. And the information is gathered from the Department of Labor, from census data, to make that determination. Now, HUBZone maps are updated every 5 years as opposed to annually. So in the past, they were, every year they were updating the maps and saying, okay, this area is qualified, this one is not. So now the maps are going to be updated every 5 years. So they were just updated July of 2023. So this 5-year redesignation provides small businesses with the ability to plan and invest in their HUBZone communities without fear that their designation may change from one year to the next. So, the SBA regulations also provide an additional 3 years of designation for expiring HUBZones. These are those redesignated HUBZones. And this is simply to help companies prepare for the transition to a new HUBZone. Now, here is a picture of the map and a link as to where you can find it. You can visit the SBA website to find the HUBZone maps, to look up your address and see if you are located within a HUBZone. The map is color-coded and it's easy to read. You can play around with it, zoom in and out to identify qualified areas. So this is a good tool to use if you're thinking about moving your business or you're going to open a business and you want to, take advantage of the HUBZone certification. Now, we do recommend that you enter a specific address for best results because if you're just glancing at it, one side, of the street could be HUBZone certified and across the street it's not. So just make sure to plug in an address there to get the most accurate information. Now, to be eligible for this program, there are 4 major eligibility requirements that must be met. So you must be a small business by reference to small business size standards. You must be at least 51% owned by U.S. citizens. If there are multiple owners making up that 51%, all owners must be U.S. citizens. Your principal office must be located within a HUBZone. An employee place of residence, you must have at least 35% of your employees reside in a HUBZone. It doesn't have to be the same HUBZone where the business is located, but they do have to reside in a HUBZone as well. The red text on here is for the Code of Federal Regulations if you're interested in looking up that information as well. So size, as we mentioned in the intro and the 8A program, You have to be a small business in accordance with SBA site standards to be eligible for this program. At the time of application for certification, a HUBZone small business concern must meet the SBA's size standards for its primary industry classification. And at time of initial contract offer, a HUBZone small business concern must be small for the size standard corresponding to the NAICS code assigned to the contract. As I said, you must be a 51%, you must be owned by at least 51% U.S. citizens. If you have more than one owner, everybody has to be a U.S. citizen. The SBA does not consider holders of permanent visas and resident aliens to be citizens. Now, your principal office must be located within a designated HUBZone. And your principal office means the location where the greatest number of your employees at any one location perform their work. So let's say if you have an employee that works at multiple locations, then the employee will be deemed to work at the location where the employee spends more than 50% of his or her time. If an employee does not spend more than 50% of their time at any one location, and if you have multiple locations and at least one of those locations is a non-HUBZone location, then the employee would be deemed to work at a non-HUBZone location. Now, in order for a location to be considered the principal office, the concern must conduct business at this location. And for those concerns whose primary industry classification is services or construction, the determination of principal office excludes the concerned employees who perform more than 50% of their work at job site locations to fulfill specific contract obligations. So if all of a concern's employees perform more than 50% of their work at job sites, then the concern does not comply with the principal office requirement. Aside from being located in a HUBZone, at least 35% of your employees must also reside in a HUBZone. Now, the SBA has its own definition as to what an employee is for purposes of applying to this program. So an employee means all individuals employed on a full-time, part-time, or other basis, so long as that individual works a minimum of 10 hours per week. This includes employees obtained from a temporary employee agency, leasing concern, or through a union agreement. Now, volunteers are not considered employees, and you cannot count them as part of the 35% requirement. When determining the percentage of employees that reside in a HUBZone, if the percentage results in a fraction, you can round up to the nearest whole number. Now, the SBA defines reside to live in a primary residence at a place for at least 180 days or as a currently registered voter and with the intent to live there indefinitely. Now, in order to prove that, right, that they the intent to live there indefinitely, they can demonstrate their intent by, updating their ID or driver's license and submitting, a copy of that with your application. If you have an employee, that has just been at their new address for 30 or 60 days, you can demonstrate that intent by updating those documents, the ID or the driver's license. Now, the HUBZone program is managed out of DC. So to get more specific answers, we do recommend that you contact them directly at hubzone@sba.gov. The HUBZone program also offers conference calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they are available to, answer questions during those times. So they can take live questions during those calls. So if you have a specific scenario you'd like to discuss with them or a pressing question, you can call in Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have, fact sheets, checklists, and details about eligibility and applying on our website. So make sure to visit sba.gov/HUBZone. Then, of course, we have the link here for the maps as well. So this concludes the overview of the HUBZone program. I'm not seeing any additional questions in the Q&A box, but if you think of anything, please feel free to type that in there. I am checking that out as I go through the presentation. So if anything comes to mind, please go ahead and enter that there. Okay, so now let's talk about, oh, I did that one fast, the Woman-Owned Small Business and Economically Disadvantaged Woman-Owned Small Business Certification. So the federal government's goal is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to woman-owned small businesses each year. So joining the WOSB Federal Contracting Program makes a business eligible to compete for federal contracts that are set aside for the program. Now, you can also still compete for contract awards under other socioeconomic programs that you qualify for. So you don't have to, pick just one certification to apply for it. If you meet the eligibility criteria, the requirements for 8A, HUBZone, and WOSB, and the VetCert, you can be certified in all 4 programs. You don't have to pick one over the other. Now for the WOSB, for firms that choose not to participate in the SBA's WOSB Federal Contracting Program, they may continue to identify as a woman-owned small business in SAM.gov for the purposes of competing for other contracts. But you would not be eligible to pursue federal contracts restricted for SBA certified WOSBs or EDWOSBs. So there are set-asides for people that, go through the formal application process with the SBA, and you get the formal certification of WOSB or EDWOSB, and you can pursue those contracts. But if you don't go through the formal application, you can still go on SAM.gov and self-certify or identify yourself as a woman-owned small business. But you wouldn't be able to pursue those, contracts that are set aside for people that went through the formal application process. Just for reference here at the bottom, we do have, the dollars that were awarded in FY23. In the next few weeks, we should have the FY24 numbers. But in FY23, 30.9 were awarded to WOSB certified firms. That's up from 28.1 billion in FY22. The industries where most of these contracts are going to are in the NAICS code, the Sector 54 and Sector 23, which is construction, and 54 is professional, scientific, and technical services. So how do you know if the WOSB program is right for you? So on this slide here, we have the eligibility criteria for the program. So in order to be eligible for this program, you must be a small business concern for the primary NAICS code or contract. So the WOSB and EDWOSB has limited NAICS codes, and I'll go into that in the following slides. But you also have to be at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more women who are U.S. citizens. That 51% ownership must be direct and unconditional as well. And the women must manage the daily operations of the business, including being, the highest officer position within the business, working at the business full time during normal working hours. The woman or women must have the managerial experience required to run the business. The women must be the ones making the long-term decisions for the business. And then for this program, there is no minimum amount of time for business to be operational before you can apply. So this one doesn't require that you be in business for at least 2 years before you apply. You can do it as soon as you start your business. Now, in order to qualify as an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business, then there's additional criteria that has to be met. These are the thresholds that are in line with the 8A Business Development Program. So you're going to have to submit documentations demonstrating your financial condition to make sure that you meet, the economic threshold. So your personal net worth must be less than $850,000. Your income must be $400,000 or less. and your total assets must be 6.5 million or less for the fair market value of all personal assets. So these thresholds are in line, like I said, with the 8A Business Development Program. Now, for all applicants, regardless if you're applying for the WOSB or EDWOSB, you're going to need to submit documentation, to prove your ownership in the business. So all businesses are also going to have to provide proof of U.S. citizenship. So you'll be asked to upload a copy of your birth certificate, an unexpired passport, naturalization paperwork for the owners who are women. If you are an LLC, you will need to upload articles of organization, your operating agreement, and any amendments. Corporations will need to upload, bylaws, articles of incorporation, stock ledgers, voting agreements. For partnerships, you'll need to include, your partnership agreement. If you have a DBA certificate, you need to upload that as well. And for sole proprietorships as well. So it doesn't matter what business structure you have, but you will be asked to submit, that documentation with your application. It's just part of the requirements for all documents. Okay, so if you are looking to get economically disadvantaged women-owned small business certification as well, there's additional documentation that's going to need to be submitted. You're going to have to disclose your financial information. So that's why there's the personal financial statement or SBA Form 413. We will ask to see copies of your tax returns for each woman that's claiming the economic disadvantage and for your spouse as well. You'll have to submit your 2 most recent personal income tax returns, including all schedules, as well as the 2 most recent W-2s for each woman that's claiming the economic disadvantage, and for your spouse as well, unless you're legally separated. And any other documents to demonstrate your economic disadvantage. If you don't have W-2s, you may submit your 1099s. And then just make sure that, for the tax returns, you must include yourself and your spouse. If you're filing separate, make sure you still include those as well. Okay, so as I briefly mentioned, to qualify for this program, your NAICS code, not all NAICS codes are eligible, right? There's limited NAICS codes for WOSB and EDWOSB. Sorry, I saw a message here that my screen was not showing. I hope everybody can still see my screen. So as I mentioned, you have to fall under a certain list of eligible industries. So not all NAICS codes are eligible for this program. So there are contracts that are, for specific industries where women-owned small businesses are underrepresented. And the SBA maintains a list of those eligible industries and their NAICS codes. So you want to make sure that your NAICS code appears on the list before you apply. You can click on the link above here, or on the bottom here, eligible NAICS codes, to see if your NAICS code is on the list. Now, if your NAICS code is not on either list, then there are no contract opportunities for you under this program. So, it wouldn't be worth your while to go ahead and apply for it if your NAICS code is not listed. There are about 733 eligible industries, and like over 600 are designated for WOSB program participants, and an additional 100, a little over 100, are eligible for competition among, EDWOSBs, economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. Congress requires SBA to conduct a study every 5 years to identify industries in which small businesses that are owned and controlled by women are underrepresented in the federal marketplace. So they do make updates to this list. So if maybe right now your NAICS code is not appearing on the list, in a couple of years, it may change and be added onto the list. Okay, this program is also managed by headquarters, and only they can answer questions regarding your application. So if you want to check on the status of your application, you can reach out to them at wosb@sba.gov. If you are interested in signing up for training directly from our program office, you can also send them an email at wosbtraining VetCert@SBA.gov. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the queue here, so I will continue on to the Veteran Small Business Certification. So every year, the federal government awards a portion of contracting dollars specifically to businesses owned by veterans. Also, small businesses owned by veterans can purchase surplus property from the government, and we'll discuss that in the following slides as well. So what are the benefits of getting certified into this program? So the federal government aims to award at least 3% of all federal contracting dollars to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses each year. Competition is limited for certain federal contract opportunities to businesses that participate in the service-disabled veteran-owned small business program. Now, joining this program makes your business eligible to compete for the program's set-aside and sole source contracts. Certified veteran-owned small businesses have additional opportunities to pursue sole source and set-aside contracts at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs under the VA's VetCert Program. The VA sets aside at least 7% of its contracts each year, specifically for certified veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. To apply for certification with the SBA, a firm must meet the following requirements. You must be considered a small business as defined by the size standard corresponding to any NAICS code listed in the business's SAM profile. You must have no less than 51% of the business owned and controlled by one or more veterans. For certification as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, have no less than 51% of the business owned and controlled by one or more veterans rated as service-disabled by the VA. For those veterans who are permanently and totally disabled and unable to manage the daily business operations of their business may still qualify if their spouse or appointed permanent caregiver is assisting in that management. The SBA's VetCert program is a top priority and emphasizes the SBA's commitment to supporting the veteran community. 2 million veteran-owned small businesses operate in the United States and employ approximately 5 million workers. Veteran-owned small businesses contribute significantly to the U.S. economy, generating $1.3 trillion in total sales. As of January of 2024, the SBA database of certified veteran-owned small businesses had grown to over 25,000 firms. Now, to get the most up-to-date information on this program, I do encourage you to visit the SBA's website. This program is managed out of headquarters, and we do not have access to your application here in the field. But for program-specific questions, please reach out to VetCert@SBA.gov. For more general questions, you can reach out here to us locally at your local district office or one of our resource partners as well. Or you can try the Veterans Business Outreach Centers. We do have an LA, the Los Angeles Regional VBOC, and that covers our counties here in Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino. If you would rather speak to someone, they also have a dedicated toll-free call center, and that number is listed here, and they're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So that concludes the information on the Veterans Certification Program as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have a couple of slides for you on how to go about applying at My SBA certifications. This is your one-stop destination for SBA's small business certifications. So this is a new portal that was recently rolled out in the last couple of months. So in order to reduce unnecessary customer burden, the SBA has combined its separate small business certification systems with distinct, application, compliance, and review procedures. So before the system was up and running, you needed to visit 4 different portals if you were trying to get certified into the 4 different programs, right? So depending on which program you were applying for, you had a different link. The new system, My SBA Certifications, is now the one-stop destination for all the certification programs. So through this new portal, you'll be able to apply for and manage multiple certifications all in one place. No more visiting different websites. With these new changes, the SBA estimates that the time it takes a small business owner to complete the application will be reduced by like 40% for a single certification and up to 70% for firms seeking multiple certifications. So these improvements are expected to reduce the average processing times for the WOSB and 8A applications by up to 80%. I know there was a lot of frustration with like the WOSB and the 8A program before because it could take months and months for you to get certified into the program. It was a lot of back and forth. So we're hopeful that with this new system, that's going to cut down the time and you'll be able to get certified much, much quicker. So when you go ahead and visit My SBA Certifications, you're going to want to click on the Should I Apply to get started. And the system is going to ask you a series of questions that are related to business ownership, NAICS codes, your readiness, and eligibility. So it's going to take you through each of these sections here, the ownership, match, readiness, eligibility, and it'll give you your results, right? Under ownership, it's going to ask you, do you own 51% or more of your business? What is your sex? Are you claiming social disadvantage? Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a veteran? Under the match section, it's going to ask you things like, do you sell what the government buys? It's going to ask you to like really type in your NAICS code there to see, it's going to actually show you how much the federal government has awarded in your field. So, that's going to kind of answer itself there. Do you sell what the government buys? For readiness, is your business ready to take full advantage of the SBA certification programs? Have you generated revenue? Do you have a track record of delivering, quality goods and services on time? Can you invoice and receive payments electronically? And things like that. It's going to ask you a series of questions related to that. Under the eligibility tab, it's going to ask you basic things like, do you own a small business located in the United States? This is going to be used to determine if you're eligible for the SBA certification program. Do you believe your principal office is located in a HUBZone? Are you registered in sam.gov? It'll ask you if you're under like financial limits to see if you qualify for like the 8A or the EDWOSB. So it'll ask you on there, if your personal income is less than 400,000, your net worth is under 850, assets under 6.5 million, and things like that. So based upon what you answer there, it's going to give you your results and tell you, okay, based on your responses, you may be eligible for the following SBA certification programs, right? So it'll tell you what you would qualify for. So from once you see this, you'll see, okay, I qualify for 8A and EDWOSB. And from there, you're going to want to visit the knowledge base to preview your application questions. And then you can also take a look at, the different tips that we have for success. And that way, what documents to have ready once you get into the formal application and start uploading your documents on there. Here is a sample of all the information you're going to find in that knowledge base. This is going to be a live link for you as well to take you exactly to this page. You can find information here on, how do I create My SBA certification account, just to get you started on that, right? It has a guide for supporting documents as well. And probably the most important here would be this application preview. Make sure you check that out so that it'll give you screenshots, or if you're already in the system and you're stuck along the way somewhere, you can check that out to see, where do you go from there. So check that out before you start the application, or if you get stuck somewhere along the way. This here is just a timeline of the application process. As I mentioned early on, you are going to need to register your firm with SAM before you can create an account in My SBA. In the portal, you will complete the application and upload your supporting documentation inside this portal. You don't need to send any hard copies, mail anything in to anyone. It is all done electronically. Once the SBA receives the application, we're going to conduct a check of all the documents. If everything looks good, we will notify you that we have a complete application and will soon begin the review. If documents are incomplete or missing, we will issue a deficiency letter outlining what is missing, and the application will be returned to you. It's not going to say that it was denied. It's simply returned to you for further clarification. Now, after a complete application is received, an analyst will begin the review and may request additional information from the applicant before a final decision may be rendered. The analyst will make a recommendation to the director of the program for which you have applied. Now, the director is going to be the one that makes the final decision to approve or deny your application. And once that decision is made, you will receive a letter. So that letter serves as your official date of entry into the program, or programs, right, if you were eligible for more than one. And your approval date will be listed in SAM and DSBS. If you need any assistance along the way, please feel free to reach out to our office or one of our research partners so we can assist you for free, completely free, with the process. Because you'll see that there are many consultants out there, that'll want to charge you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to help you set up that SAM profile, to draft up your business plan, or even, to complete the application for you. But this is something that can completely be done for free without having to spend the money on that as well. If you experience any technical issues during the application process, please submit a ticket to the service desk, and I have that linked here at the bottom of the slide if you run into any trouble along the way. So this concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope you have found this useful information and that you're ready to go ahead and apply for one of the programs, if not for all of them. If you have any specific questions or if you want to reach out to me, you have my email and phone number listed here. And like I said, within the next 24 to 48 hours, you will receive a copy of the presentation with a link to the recording as well. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box, but I will stay online for a few more minutes. If there's a question that has come to mind, please type that out. But if not, thank you so much for joining us today and have a good rest of your day.